to be able to do this with you guys. So, Jacob, how was your snow day?
It was cold. Well, we hope that you survived the blizzard of 2014. Had a good 2 snow days. But today we're going to just have some fun. We're going to do our tsunami as usual because you don't get away from us just because it's snow days. So Maddie's going to tell us about how the video is going to go.
Okay, cool. So first we're going to play a game because obviously it's everyone's favorite part at Tsunami. So we're going to play a really fun game and then we're going to hear some announcements from Brett. And what the coolest part is that we're still going to be able to hear a message. So we'll go through this and then you'll hear Brett talk at the end. So, okay, first we're going to play our game. Jacob, why don't you tell us about our game?
Okay, well, our game is called Make It or Break It. Y'all may have played this before. What we're going to do is we have a series of videos we're going to show you. And during the video, it's going to be somebody performing a stunt, such as gymnastics or skiing. And what we're going to do right as they jump or start to perform their move, we're going to pause it. And during this time, you're going to decide if they make it or break it. Are they going to land it or are they going to fall and wipe out? So keep up with your score. And if you get all of them correct, you're pretty awesome. If you miss all of them, well, there's always next time. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is our first one. We've got a gymnast here. What do you think is going to happen?
Okay, well, I think that his back is pretty close to that bar, so there's a good chance that he's going to fall, but I don't doubt him completely because I know I could have done that first thing that he did. So I don't know. I'm not sure about this one.
Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, and he fell.
Probably breaks it back. That was not very good. Okay, our next one. Skiing. This is like in the Olympics, so this is probably going to be pretty good. He's going to flip right here. Or maybe he tripped. I'm not sure. So, what do you think?
I think he's going to fall. Just because I kind of want him to fall because I think it would be funny. So, I say he's going to fall.
He falls, topples down the hill.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it.
Oh,
yeah, no, he makes it. That's good.
Well,
okay, but it's not over yet. So, he's going through.
We got
Check
one.
it out.
Oh, that's a big one.
Check it out. Okay, what is that? No way. Okay, I don't know if you can really tell, but he's kind of like his head is down right now. His skis are up. There's not much hope for him at this point. So, but he did surprise us before. So
yeah, I'll give him a benefit of the doubt. I think he lands it. And he lands it. He lands it.
He does it. Pretty good.
Nice.
So he made that one.
Our next one is, okay, a guy just took a basketball and threw it about 30 yards into this hoop. So next we have a man who's throwing a frisbee trying to reenact this shot.
Have you guys ever thrown a frisbee? It is not easy. Okay, so.
So what do you think? Is he going to make it or is it just going to bounce out?
I think I'm going to keep quiet on this one. I'm not sure.
I think he'll make it. I think he'll make it.
It's it.
And he made it.
That was really cool.
It.
That was really good. Okay, this is my favorite one. So she's going, like she's ready to make her move on whatever these
She
pole
looks
balls.
pretty, she looks like she's going to do it.
Right, she's like got this good setting around her. I know it's a little blurry, but she like looks like she knows what she's doing. So let's keep on playing it. She's getting ready.
Oh,
she falls right on her face. She's so bad at
She
this.
didn't make it.
Okay, that was good. It was a good try.
All right, guys.
Cool. So now we're gonna go and see Brett and hear what's going on for the further weeks to come.
And we will see you back in 2 weeks on February 12th. Have a good night, guys.
Hey, what's up, Tsunami? It is freezing cold out here. It's the day that you guys are off and it's not even snowing, but it is cold. And I'm on the roof of our building to tell you that next week for Tsunami, we are not meeting here at the building. I'm standing on the building where we're not going to be having Tsunami next week, February 5th. February 5th, I just saw snowflakes, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. February 5th, you are going to be hanging out with your small group. If you have no idea what you're doing, you better get a hold of your small group leader. If you can't get a hold of your small group leader, call the church and we will help you figure out what your small group is doing next week. But don't come to the building on February 5th because you'll be disappointed because we're not having Tsunami. We will see you guys back on February 12th when we start a dating series. That's right, middle schoolers, we're going to talk about dating, so make sure you come and bring your friends. All right.
What would you do if there was no tsunami? What if there wasn't a place you could come every week to grow in your faith? What if you looked around and there weren't any adults to lead you in your faith? Look around. What if they were all gone? What if your walk with God was all up to you? What if you had to figure it out? What if you didn't have a small group? a band to lead you in worship, a place to come together with your friends. How would you grow? How would you continue to learn about your faith? Will you have the skills you need to grow? Would you still be walking with God? What would you do?
So tonight we wrap up our skills series, and obviously we've left you, or at least started you with the question, do you have the skills necessary to walk? We wanted you to really begin wrestling with this as we finish out this series. The series has been all about developing faith skills. And we've been taking a look at the life of Daniel and a couple of his friends and looking at when the pressure was on when it came to Daniel and his friends. Daniel had the faith skills that were necessary to not crack under the pressure. And we looked at the fact that he and his friends had read the Bible and were able to apply it to their lives, and that we grow when we apply the Bible to our lives. We've learned what it looks like to pray and make our prayers about a relationship and not just about getting things that we want. We've talked about learning to talk by the way that we walk, learning how to share our faith. And guys, that is a skill that if we could learn how to share our faith, not only would it help others, but it would really push us in our growth and in our spiritual growth and building our faith. And what we've learned about Daniel and his friends, if you haven't been here the last couple of weeks, let me kind of catch you up. Daniel and his friends were Israelites, and I'm sure you've heard of the Babylonian Empire, but Israel was taken over by Babylon, and these guys were taken to live in Babylon, and they were chosen. Daniel in particular was chosen because he was a really, really good guy. He was smart, he was intelligent, he was able to do a lot of things, and he was recognized for his leadership. So he gained leadership in the Babylonian Empire, and eventually Babylon fell and was taken over by Persia, and even still the new Persian king recognized that Daniel was a good guy. And so Daniel's been living in another country, but still kept his faith intact. He's been living in what is now Persia and still growing in his relationship with God, and has risen to a place of power in this foreign land. And what we learn about Daniel and his friends, but Daniel in particular, is that Daniel was a really good guy. I mean, he seemed like he really had his act together. He loved God. He had faith skills. But if you look at his life, it kind of looks like Daniel had a formula that he kind of figured out when it came to his relationship with God. And it kind of looks like do really good stuff, or, please God, and God's going to bless you. It's almost like it became like a 2+2 thing, that if you do certain things, that you're going to have a great relationship with God and things are going to work out well for you. And we, I think, often relate to God like this, just like Daniel did. Maybe we relate to God where we think that we have to have our act together to have a relationship with Him, or we have to do things a certain way and then God's going to bless us. It's kind of like when you think about going to English class and you've got a quiz. It's a lot easier to approach that English class when you know you've put the work in and you've studied. You feel good about going to class because you know you're going to perform well. Or how about this? Raise your hand real quick if you love the dentist. Is anyone raising their hand? Okay. If you're raising your hand, you're crazy, because that's just weird. Nobody really likes the dentist. But we all feel a lot better, don't we, about going to the dentist when we know we've flossed or we've brushed our teeth and we've done a lot to take care of our teeth. It's easy to approach the dentist when we feel like we've put the work in to take care of our teeth. And sometimes we approach God that way, that we feel better about approaching God or having a relationship with God when we've performed, when we've done all the right things. The question is, what happens when we haven't always done the right thing? What happens when you didn't do everything right? And what happens to our relationship with God when we don't always do what we know we're supposed to do? I mean, often what happens, if you're like me, when we sin or do things that we know are not pleasing to God, or we miss an opportunity to do the right thing, we feel like we've maybe let ourselves down, or maybe we let our parents down, or we let others down, or maybe we feel like we let God down, or all of the above. So I think a lot of us, we think about the Christian life like it's like a box. And as long as we stay right here in the middle of the box, we're okay. As long as we stay right here and don't get too close to the edge, that God's still happy with us. But if we get too close to the edge, or we step even an inch outside of the box, that we've let everybody down, and maybe stepping outside of the box makes us feel like we're mad at ourselves and distant from God. So like I said earlier, we've already touched on a couple of faith skills. We've talked about prayer, we've talked about reading your Bible, and we've talked about learning how to share your faith as things that help your faith grow. And tonight we're going to talk about worship. And I think that if we could figure out what worship really means, it would have a huge impact, not only now, but also in our future. And when we're talking about worship, we're not really talking about just singing songs in church. What we mean by worship is worshiping God with our lives. Like, what does it mean to worship Him with everything that we are? I mean, worshiping God has a lot to do with how we esteem Him, how we honor God, and how we worship Him by the way that we live. And what I want us to think about is, if God were to say to us, I want you to worship me with your life, what does that mean? I mean, how would you answer that question if God were to ask you, hey, worship me with your life? Does it mean to always do all the right things? I think that's a lot of us, that's what we think, is to worship God means we have to stay in that box, or we have to always do the right thing. But if that's the case, what happens when we step out? I mean, what happens when we choose to go off of the path that God's designed us for? What happens when we choose to step over the line? What happens when we choose to step out of the box? Is it possible to worship once we step out of God's plan? Does it make you not a worshiper once you've crossed that line? Or maybe it causes you to think that worship is only for people who are perfect, only for spiritual giants, only for people who are more spiritual. And so what does it mean to worship, to really worship God with our lives? So tonight we're going to jump back into the book of Daniel. And what you need to know about Daniel, if you've ever read it on your own, the first part of the book really deals with Daniel's life and the life of his friends and how they moved to Babylon. But the second half of the book, things get a little weird. It's prophetic. It's actually what we term apocalyptic literature, not apocalyptic like a zombie uprising, more like prophecy, but not like prophecy like, hey, it's going to rain tomorrow, or this year I'm going to get a girlfriend. It's like end of time, kind of explaining the rising and falling of nations. So kind of, it was stuff that Daniel was writing this literature. He was seeing visions that God was revealing stuff to him that even he didn't understand, but he was just writing it down. So if you ever read, Daniel on your own, don't kind of freak out when you get to that section, because there's actually really, really good stuff in there that is even applicable to our lives today. But right in the middle of this kind of prophetic writing that Daniel is doing, there's this prayer that I want to read. And here's what Daniel says. He says, Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, we have sinned and done wrong. We have been wicked and have rebelled. We have turned away from your commands and laws. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our ancestors, and to all the people of the land. And if you're reading this, you're probably thinking like, wait, hold on a second, Daniel. You lived a perfect life. See, Daniel very easily could have approached God with his attitude of, hey, God, I've done all these wonderful things. I went in the lion's den. I prayed to you all the time. He could have gone through this list of things that he had done for God and distanced himself completely from the rest of the Israelites. But Daniel's approach was different. He didn't pretend to be anything that he wasn't. He didn't pretend as though everything was fine. In fact, he was willing to lump himself in with the rest of Israel. See, what Daniel remembered was the whole reason that they were in Babylon and Persia to begin with. It's because they hadn't gotten it right. And instead of pretending as though he was perfect and having this perfect list of things and thinking like that was how he was supposed to worship God, now he realized that he needed to humble himself and include himself in with the rest of Israel who just didn't get it right. And they had failed. And what's really weird is that later on in the book, Daniel is still having a vision, and in his vision, he has a vision of a man coming to him. Like I know that's weird, and I know some of you are still thinking about that, like having a vision in a vision, and you'll just think about that. But so this guy walks up to him, and some people debate of who he was. Maybe he was Jesus or a prophet. They don't know exactly. But what this guy said to Daniel was that it was because of Daniel's humility. He came to Daniel and said, "Hey, your humility and the fact that you humbled yourself, that's what has made you acceptable to God. That's why God is approaching you. That your humility is what drew God closer, and not your perfection." And what Daniel realized and lived out is that worship isn't about doing things as much as it is having a relationship with God. See, worship isn't doing things for God. It's about doing things with God and engaging in a relationship with Him. And here's why it's so important for us to figure out what worship really is. It's so important for us to understand that worship is not about doing things for God, but walking with Him, both now and in our future. Because if we don't figure this out right now, we're going to be tempted to think that we can earn our way to worshiping God. And that simply just is impossible. It's not at all possible to earn it. We can't do enough to get to a place where we can worship God and be perfect enough so that we can worship Him. Now, God has designed us to live a certain way. Sure, there are expectations that He has for us. There's hopes and dreams that He has for us to live the way that He's created us to live. But we're human, and we're going to step outside of God's expectations for us. And see, what we have to understand right now is that God wants us to be able to worship Him while we're doing things for Him, but also be able to come back to Him when we've failed. When we make mistakes, worshiping God is coming back to Him and partnering back with Him and continuing to walk with Him. And we got to get that figured out right now, because if we don't, we're going to spend our lives trying to earn a relationship and earn a place to worship God. And here's why it's so important to figure out what worship really is for our future. Because at some point, like we talked about at the beginning of this night, at some point you're not going to have your small group leader that you currently have walking with you. You're going to graduate high school. You're going to move on with your life. You're going to be in college or whatever it is that you're going to do, and you're going to be outside of your parents' control. And if we can't figure out what worship is and we still try to earn it, we're going to get to a point in our lives where we've done something that has separated us from God, and we're going to find ourselves disappointed in ourselves and feeling as though God's disappointed with us. And if we're not careful, we're going to walk away from God thinking we can't have a relationship with Him. And what you need to understand is that, first of all, God is bigger than our sin. That God is so much bigger, and He can handle when we mess up. And that He wants us to come back to Him. That He wants to engage us in a relationship where we are. And that when we come back to Him, when we engage in a relationship with Him and walk with Him, that not only does it worship Him, but it allows us to have those moments where we mess up be part of our worship of Him. And so here's what we need to do. First of all, don't make knowing God a checklist. Don't make worship and a relationship of Him a checklist, a list of things that you have to check off in order to worship. Worship is an attitude. And a relationship with God is an attitude. Knowing God is putting ourselves in a place where we are striving to have a relationship with Him and not just checking things off of a list of things to do. And the second thing that we need to do is to go toward God when you get it wrong and not away from Him. That we worship God and we engage in a relationship with Him when we move toward Him when we get it wrong and not away from Him. So what I want to ask you to think about is, how would things change if you really approached God from a standpoint not of checking things off a list, but of engaging in a walk with Him?
Like, how would people see you differently if you chose to not just do things for God, but to engage in a relationship with Him, to walk with Him? Because that is what worship is.